Okay, so this is more of the book by Florence Scovel Shinn, and we're starting off with chapter The Law of Karma and the Law of Forgiveness. Man receives only that which he gives. The game of life is a game of boomerangs. Man's thoughts, deeds and words return to him sooner or later with astounding accuracy. This is the law of karma, which is Sanskrit for come back. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. I quite like the idea of life being a game of boomerangs. The more man knows, the more he is responsible for, and a person with a knowledge of spiritual law, which he does not practice, suffers greatly in consequence. The fear of the Lord or the law is the beginning of wisdom. If we read the word law, Lord as law, it will make many passages in the Bible much clearer. Well, I don't like the idea that the more someone knows, the more he is responsible for. It makes it very tempting to know less so that you're not responsible for much. I'm quite a spiritual person and I know a lot of spiritual principles, but I hate to think that if I decide to have a day off and not practice them, that I'm going to suffer greatly in consequence. I do like the idea of using the word law, L-A-W, instead of Lord. Yes. But I don't agree with the fact that the fear of law is the beginning of wisdom. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that fear should be related to wisdom. Like respect would be a better word. Freedom from all unhappy conditions comes through knowledge of spiritual law. Obedience precedes authority, and the law obeys man when he obeys the law. The law of electricity must be obeyed before it becomes man's servant. When handled ignorantly, it becomes man's deadly foe. The same applies to the laws of the mind. Okay. A woman with a strong personal will wished she owned a house which belonged to an acquaintance. She often made mental pictures of herself living in the house. In the course of time, the man died and she moved into the house. Several years afterwards, coming into knowledge of spiritual law, she said to me, "Do you think I had anything to do with that man's death?" I replied, "Yes. Your desire was so strong, everything made way for it. But you paid your karmic debt. Your husband, who you loved devotedly, died soon after, and the house was a white elephant on your hands for years." The original owner, however, could not have been affected by her thoughts had he been positive in the truth, nor her husband, but they were both under karmic law. The woman should have said, feeling the great desire for the house, "Infinite intelligence, give me the right house equally as charming as this, the house which is mine by divine right." The divine selection would have given her a perfect satisfaction and brought good to all. The divine pattern is the only safe pattern to work by. Desire is a tremendous force and must be directed in the right channels or chaos ensues. Okay. So her will to own this house meant that she caused a man to die. But the man wouldn't have died if he was in the right place spiritually. It's because he wasn't that the woman's will to live in that house worked. I think that's what it's saying. Okay. A woman came to me in great distress. Her daughter was determined to take a very hazardous trip, and the mother was filled with fear. She said that she had used every argument, had pointed out all the dangers, and forbidden her to go. But the daughter became more and more rebellious and determined. I said to the mother, "You are forcing your personal will upon your daughter, which you have no right to do, and your fear of the trip is only attracting it, for man attracts what he fears." I added, "Let go and take your mental hands off. Put it in God's hands and use this statement. I put this situation in the hands of infinite love and wisdom. If this trip is the divine plan, then I bless it and I no longer resist. But if it's not divinely planned, I give thanks that it is now dissolved and dissipated." A day or two after, her daughter said to her mother, "I have given up on the trip," and the situation returned to its native nothingness. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? That if you are really resistant and try and stop someone from doing something, and you use your self-will in that kind of controlling way, you could actually force somebody to do something that could end really badly. Whereas if you leave it in God's hands, they'd probably not do it in the end anyway. But if you forced them into doing it because you were trying to be controlling, you could end up being responsible for their death. Yes. Yes, I think about my mother when I read that. I don't think she's capable of not telling me what to do. And then of course I'm going to do it. But had she not have told me not to do it, it would be different. Christianity is founded upon the law of forgiveness. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the karmic law, and Christ within each man is his redeemer and salvation from all inharmonious conditions. So that suggests that once you listen to God and the law of forgiveness, you rise up above karmic law, and the law of forgiveness kind of overrides it. Many people are in ignorance of the fact that gifting and things are investments. Hoarding and saving invariably lead to loss. I knew a man who wanted to buy a fur-lined overcoat. He and his wife went to various shops, but there was none that he wanted. He said they were all too cheap looking. Finally, he was shown one. The salesman said it was valued at $1,000, but the manager would sell it him for $500, as it was late in the season. His financial possessions amounted to $700. The reasoning mind would have said you can't afford to spend nearly all you have on a coat. But he was very intuitive, so he never reasoned. He turned to his wife and said, "If I get this coat, I'll make a ton of money." So his wife consented. About a month later, he received £10,000 in commission. The coat had made him feel so rich, it linked him with success and prosperity. Without the coat, he would not have received the commission. It was an investment paying large dividends. If man ignores these leadings to spend or to give, the same amount of money will go in an uninteresting or unhappy way. For example, a woman told me on Thanksgiving Day that she had informed her family that they could not afford a Thanksgiving dinner. She did have the money, but she decided to save it. A few days later, someone entered her room and stole the money from the bureau. That's quite interesting. That is quite interesting, because, in today's culture, people are taught to save and build up money, but yeah, there are loads of examples in the world and in the news of people losing all their money. Maybe they were wrong to hoard it and save it. Maybe they should have spent it whilst they had the chance. I'm definitely a fan of spending it whilst I've got it. Live in the day. So Jesus Christ brought the good news, the gospel. There was a higher law than the law of karma. It's the law of grace and forgiveness. It is the law which frees man from the law of cause and effect, the law of consequence, under grace and not under law. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So you can put yourself in a place of being under the law of grace, of forgiveness, and then you won't be under the law of karma, which is cause and effect. So there's different levels of law by the sounds of it. That sounds interesting. Next chapter is casting the burden. I knew a woman whose burden was resentment. She said, I cast this burden of resentment on the Christ within, and I go free to be loving, harmonious and happy. The lion takes his fierceness from your fear. Perhaps one's fear is of personality. Do not avoid the people feared. Be willing to meet them cheerfully, and they will either prove to be golden links in the chain of one's good or disappear harmoniously from one's pathway. Perhaps one's fear of disease or germs, then one should be fearless and undisturbed in a germ-laden situation, and he will be immune. Yes, okay, fair enough. So if you have a resentment, I need to say, I cast this burden of resentment on God, and I go free to be loving, harmonious and happy. And if I keep saying that, maybe it will work. And it's quite interesting that something scary like a lion actually takes its fierceness from your fear. So yeah, when I'm scared of somebody, they appear more fierce and scary because I'm scared. So if I actually do not avoid the people that I'm scared of and actually meet them cheerfully, they'll either prove to be important links in some good fortune of mine, or they'll just harmoniously disappear from my pathway. I'm not sure if I'm going to go into a germ-laden situation in order to become immune. I guess nurses and doctors do that all the time in their line of work. But I don't really like that idea. Next chapter is love. Real love is selfless and free from fear. It pours itself out upon the object of its affection without demanding any return. Its joy is in the joy of giving. Love is God in manifestation and the strongest magnetic force in the universe. Pure, unselfish love draws to itself, to its own. It does not need to seek or demand. Scarcely anyone has the faintest conception of real love. Man is selfish, tyrannical, fearful in his affections, thereby losing the thing he loves. Jealousy is the worst enemy of love, for the imagination runs riot, seeing the loved one attracted to another, and invariably these fears objectify if they are not neutralized. So yeah, I don't think I know the real meaning of love, and if I do, I can't practice it. It's difficult not to demand something in return. It's difficult to be unselfish. And it's difficult not to be fearful, because once you do love somebody, or at least this happens to me, as soon as I love somebody, I'm scared of losing them. So I'd rather not love them so that I'm not in fear. And I get jealous really easily. As soon as someone I care about finds someone else, even if it's just a friend, I get really jealous. So yeah, I don't think I'm capable of love. For example, a woman came to me in deep distress. The man she loved had left her for another woman, and he said that he never intended to marry her. She was torn with jealousy and resentment, and said she hoped he would suffer as he'd made her suffer. How could he leave me when I loved him so much? I replied, "You're not loving that man, you're hating him. You can never receive what you have never given. If you give perfect love, you'll receive perfect love. Perfect yourself on this. Perfect yourself on this man. Give him perfect, unselfish love, demanding nothing in return. Do not criticize or condemn, and bless him wherever he is and whoever he's with." She replied, "No, I won't bless him unless I know where he is." "Well then," I said, "that's not real love. When you send out real love will return to you, either from this man or his equivalent. For if this man is not the divine selection, you will not want him, as you are one with God, and you are one with love which belongs to you by divine right." Several months passed, and matters remained the same, but she was working conscientiously with herself. I said, "When you are no longer disturbed by his cruelty, he will cease to be cruel, as you are attracting it through your own emotions." She found she was becoming more poised and gradually losing her resentment. A few weeks later, one morning I received a letter saying that they were married. I called her and asked her what happened. She exclaimed, "It's a miracle. One day I woke up and all the suffering had ceased. I saw him that evening and he asked me to marry him. I have never seen a more devoted man. There is an old saying, 'No man is your enemy, no man is your friend. Every man is your teacher.'" So what probably happened was he ran off with this other woman, she hurt him, and he came back with his tail between his legs. But never mind, as long as he treats her nicely now, all is well. And it's true, every man is your teacher, even when they hurt your feelings. When people are happy, they usually become selfish, and automatically the law of karma is set in action. Man often suffers loss through lack of appreciation. Yep, I can sometimes be very complacent. Yes, so I need to be careful with that. No man can attract money if he despises it. Many people are kept in poverty by saying money means nothing to me, and I have a contempt for people who have it. Oh dear, I'm quite guilty of this. I do kind of despise money because it seems to be the root to all evil. But then if I believe in God, then there is no evil. So money can be used for good. It just depends on whose hands it's in. It's okay, I don't despise money. But that might have been why I was kept in poverty, because I despised it. And I suppose I do have contempt for people who have money, because I think that they are soulless, materialistic people. But there are some rich people that are really nice, so I should probably change my attitude. So that's my new plan. You've heard it here, Gail's new plan. Man must be in harmony with a thing in order to attract it. Money is God in manifestation as freedom from want and limitation, but it must always be kept in circulation and put to right use. Hoarding and saving react with grim vengeance. Okay, so yeah, if I have money, I won't hoard it. I will put it to good use and keep it circulating. And even though I don't have much money now, I do send the odd bit to charities and stuff where I can. So I'm hoping that I'm practicing that. This does not mean that man should not have houses and stocks and bonds, etc. The barns of a righteous man shall be full. If an occasion arises when money is necessary, letting it go fearlessly and cheerfully, he opens the way for more to come in. So we are allowed to save a bit of money in our bank accounts, but we need to be able to spend it without fear when the moment arises. But I can understand that fear of doing that. Like, if I had like loads of money in the bank, I wouldn't want to spend it. Like, I can understand that feeling. Yeah, I could go either way. I could either spend like mad or be really stingy. Money in itself is good and beneficial, but used for destructive purposes, hoarded and saved, or considered more important than love, brings disease and disaster and loss of money itself. So, yeah, if you hoard and save it, or if you consider it more important than love, then no good is going to come to you. So man, in ignorance of the law, brings about his own destruction. All disease, all unhappiness come from the violation of the law of love. Men's boomerangs of hate, resentment and criticism come back laden with sickness and sorrow. Love seems almost a lost art, but the man with the knowledge of spiritual laws knows it must be regained. People are sometimes filled with remorse that they have done someone an unkindness, perhaps years ago. If the wrong cannot be righted, its effect can be neutralized by doing someone a kindness in the present. Sorrow, regret and remorse tear down the cells of the body and poison the atmosphere of the individual. Yeah, that's interesting, because I've done some unkind things to people many years ago, and I'm not sure I can right them, but I can neutralise it by doing someone a kindness now, because living in regret and remorse apparently destroys the cells of the body and poisons the atmosphere of me, which I don't want. Next chapter, intuition or guidance. Infinite Spirit, reveal to me the way. Let me know if there is anything for me to do. The answer will come through intuition or a hunch, a chance remark from somebody or a passage in a book. The answers are sometimes quite startling in their exactness. And I totally relate to this. I'm always asking God for guidance, and it always arrives in a random way. I can't think of any examples at the moment, but say a random person at the bus stop will say something to me and I'm like, how did they know that? Or a book will open at a certain page. Just random coincidences, which I call God incidences. Giving opened the way for receiving in order to create activity in finances. One should give tithing, or giving 1/10 of one's income, is an old Jewish custom, and is sure to bring increase. So yeah, giving some of your income away as a tithing will bring you an increase. Yeah, and I think that's worked for me. Yeah. Very subtly, but it has worked for me. One day I was walking down the street when I suddenly felt a strong urge to go to a certain bakery a block or two away. The reasoning mind resisted, arguing, "There is nothing that you want." However, I had learned not to reason, so I went to the bakery, looked at everything there, and there was definitely nothing I wanted. But coming out of the shop, I encountered a woman I had thought of often, and she was in great need of help which I could give her. So often one goes for one thing and finds another. Intuition is a spiritual faculty and does not explain, but simply points the way. I really like that. So next time you get a hunch or a desire to go somewhere, just follow it. Don't reason with it. Don't pull it to pieces, because it's a spiritual faculty and it's not going to explain itself to you. It simply points you in the right direction. A woman came to me and said, "I got a hunch to take the furniture out of storage and get an apartment." The woman had come to be treated for her health. I told her I knew in getting a home of her own, her health would improve, and I added, "I believe your trouble, which is a congestion, has come from having things stored away." Congestion of things causes congestion in the body. You have violated the law of use, and your body is paying the penalty. Yeah, I used to have a congestion, and I had like a congestion of stuff, but I've cleared it all away now, and I've got rid of a lot of stuff, and I do feel less congested in my body. But yeah, that's a good reminder. People rarely think of how their affairs react on the body. There is a mental correspondence for every disease. A person might receive instantaneous healing through the realization of his body being a perfect idea in divine mind, and therefore whole and perfect. But if he continues his destructive thinking, hoarding, hating, fearing, condemning, the disease will return. That's a very good reminder. Yes, I've got health concerns, and it might be because of my destructive thinking. And I do some hating, and I do some fearing, and I do some condemning. So I need to stop that, don't I? Jesus Christ knew that all sickness came from sin, but he admonished the leper after the healing to go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon him. So man's soul or subconscious mind must be washed whiter than snow for permanent healing. The metaphysician can always delve deep for correspondence. Jesus Christ said, "Condemn not lest he also be condemned. Judge not lest he be judged." Many people have attracted disease and unhappiness through condemnation of others. What man condemns in others, he attracts to himself. So yeah, once you've been healed from your sins, you need to not sin anymore, because the disease will come back. Yes, so I'm probably guilty of some of that. I can be good for a while and then I start being sinful again. I have found it destructive to look up the psychic plane for guidance, as it is the plane of many minds, not the one mind. As man opens his mind to subjectivity, he becomes a target for destructive forces. He may receive either good or bad messages. So the science of numbers and reading of horoscopes keeps man down on the mental or mortal plane, for they only deal with the karmic path. So maybe tarot cards and horoscopes and stuff are a bad idea because they seem to be a lower level of plane or existence or guidance. We should only be looking to God for guidance. It is so much easier for the average person to have fear than faith. So faith is an effort of the will. As a man becomes spiritually awakened, he recognizes that any external inharmony is the correspondence of mental inharmony. If he stumbles or falls, he may know he is stumbling or falling in consciousness. A woman was told that there was no loss in the divine mind, therefore she could not lose anything which belonged to her. Anything lost would be returned, or she would receive its equivalent. Several years previously, she had lost $2,000. She had loaned the money to a relative during her lifetime, but the relative had died, leaving no mention of it in her will. The woman was resentful and angry, and as she had no written statement of the transaction, the woman never received the money. She was determined to deny the loss and collect the $200 from the Bank of the Universal. She had to begin by forgiving the woman, as a resentment and unforgiveness closed the doors of this wonderful bank. She made this statement: I deny loss. There is no loss in the divine mind. Therefore, I cannot lose $2,000, which belongs to me by divine right. And I think I've cut the page off, but I remember from memory that she did get that money back. Let me see if I can find it in the book. Yes, there it is. She made this statement. Okay. I deny the loss. There is no loss in the divine mind. Therefore, I cannot lose the $2,000, which belongs to me by divine right. As one door shuts, another door opens. She was living in an apartment house which was for sale, and in the lease was a clause stating that if the house was sold, the tenants would be required to move out within 90 days. Suddenly, the landlord broke the leases and raised the rent. Again, injustice was on her pathway, but this time she was undisturbed. She blessed the landlord and said, as the rent has been raised, it means that I'll be richer, for God is my supply. New leases were made out of the advanced rent, but by some divine mistake, the 90 days clause had been forgotten. Soon after, the landlord had an opportunity to sell the house. On account of the mistake in the new leases, the tenants held possession for another year. The agent offered each tenant $200 if he would vacate. Several families moved, 3 remained, including the woman. A month or 2 passed, and the agent again appeared. This time he said to the woman, Will you break your lease for the sum of $1,500? It flashed upon her. Here comes the $2,000. She remembered having said to friends in the house that we will all act together if anything more is said about leaving. So her lead was to consult her friends. These friends said, well, if they've offered you $1,500, they will certainly give you $2,000. So she received a check for $2,000 for giving up her apartment. It was certainly a remarkable working of the law, and the apparent injustice was merely opening the way for her demonstration. It proved that there was no loss, and when man takes his spiritual stand, he collects all that is his from the great reservoir of good. I will restore to you the years the locusts have eaten. The locusts are the doubts, the fears, the resentments and regrets of mortal thinking. These adverse thoughts alone rob man, for no man gives to himself but himself. No man takes away from himself but himself. Man is here to prove God and to bear witness to the truth, and he can only prove God by bringing plenty out of lack and justice out of injustice. Prove me now herewith, said the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. So that's quite interesting, that she lost that $2,000 out of being kind to her friend, and then her friend rudely went and died and didn't make a note of the loan, and then she was quite angry about that, so she knew that anger and resentment would get in the way of, the divine returning her money. So, yeah, she let go of that loss. She denied the loss existed, and she trusted in her faith. And then the bloody landlord put the rent up. More injustice. But she stuck to her faith, and by doing that, the landlord made a mistake on the new tenancies, forgot to put the 90-day clause in. So that meant she was in a position to negotiate, because he wanted her to leave and she didn't have to leave. And that's how she negotiated the £2,000 returned to her. I would have stayed a bit longer to get more than £2,000. But you see, then I'm a bit evil and greedy. But something like that has happened to me. I was treated really badly at one of my employments, and so I decided to leave, but the terms of me leaving was to give 8 weeks notice, which would have been 2 months of hell. So I handed in my notice and said 4 weeks, and out of divine miracle my boss didn't notice the mistake, so he agreed to the 4 weeks. So I would have only had to give 4 weeks notice. It got so bad at work that I just left with no notice, and just gave all my stuff back and walked out. But they still had to pay me 4 weeks pay, because I was signed off sick from the doctor. I wonder if I could have got 8 weeks of pay. But never mind, probably not. I think the doctor would have only signed me off for a month. I don't think he would have signed me off for 2 months. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed my ponderings and my readings, and I hope you can apply some of it to your lives. And there is more to come. There is more to come. Next time I will be starting on the chapter called Perfect Self-Expression, or the Divine Design. Yes. Thank you for listening.